Welcome to Love and Abuse, the show about helping you identify poisonous communication and toxic behavior. You deserve to be treated with respect and kindness. That's why it's important that you learn to pinpoint manipulative and controlling behavior so that you keep your power and your sanity. I'm your host, Paul Coliani. Welcome to another episode of Love and Abuse. As a reminder, all information on this podcast is for educational purposes only. Always seek a professional for your mental health and well-being, and always pick your battles wisely. Sometimes I create an episode out of the blue, and this is one of those episodes because I was asked a question in a group that I run for people in your situation about the idea of separation. When you separate and you go back, how long does it take to reconnect? So this person's issue was she was in a relationship for many, many years, and she left the situation, I don't know, maybe 2 or 3 times, and she's thinking, okay, this third time, this has got to be when I call it quits or not. And what I'm going to do is go back to the relationship, but how do I reconnect with the person that I was with when so much has happened? And if you are in this situation and you decided to separate for a while and you came back, how can you reconnect when you feel so guarded? When you feel like if you reconnect, then it's exposing your heart again to this person who might crush it again. And this can be with any situation, whether you're in a romantic relationship or maybe it's a relative or somebody that you've known for a while. When there's been emotional abuse or any type of hurtful behavior and you've had enough and you separate yourself from that person, you will have built an emotional barrier between you and that person, usually something surrounding your heart, the most vulnerable place inside of you, emotionally speaking. So you protect yourself by adding these layers, these boundaries, so that that person can't hurt you. They still find a way, but you do your best. It's all these coping mechanisms that you come up with so that they can't penetrate you. I mean, when I say you as in the deepest part of you, who you are at your core. Because this is what happens. We get into a relationship and we build trust and we think we are safe. And then the other person finds a way to make us feel unsafe. They hurt us. And when that hurt comes, it's a surprise. We think, what just happened? This is like in the beginning of an emotionally abusive relationship. The hurt appears and we ask ourselves, what just happened? I felt so safe. I felt so cared for. I felt supported. I felt loved. And then there's hurt. And so the hurt begins a series of steps that you go through in order to protect yourself from that hurt. And there's a few steps that will take place, one of them being denial, where you explain away the behavior and you don't want to believe what you just witnessed. So you try to find a rational explanation for it and hope it doesn't happen again, and maybe it was just a fluke. But if it happens again, then the denial, if it's continued, will of course keep you in denial instead of actually facing it head on and working through it, talking about it, and figuring it out. Another step is self-persuasion. This is where we convince ourselves that maybe we didn't hear it right, maybe we didn't see it right. It is part of denial. It is part of the whole process of trying to see the best in a person or a situation so that you make the reality of what you think is happening unreal. Meaning you see a reality you don't want to believe. So what you end up doing is going into that denial and going into a self-persuasion process so you don't have to believe that. It's all part of the mind and body's way of protecting itself, because if it's real, it'll be too hard to handle, So we can end up minimizing it, which is also another one of the steps that we take to protect ourselves coming up. The next one is developing a higher tolerance for their bad behavior. And if you have already developed a higher tolerance for bad behavior in your life, then you are more prone to be emotionally attacked, for lack of a better term, in a relationship, because you will not stand up for yourself. You will not honor your boundaries. You will not say, hey, what you just did was wrong. I won't tolerate that. I won't accept it. This is what happens as we go through life not standing up for ourselves. Then we get into a relationship where somebody crosses our boundaries. How do we stand up to them? We don't know how. We don't have a reference to do that. We don't have the resources in our tool belt. So we have to figure out what to do next, because we were hoping that the person that we were with that loves us, that's supposed to care about us, wouldn't put us in this situation. But now we're in this situation. What do I do about it? So I can understand, it makes sense that there can be a mystery when these little things start happening and there's emotional attacking going on like this. So developing a higher tolerance is a coping mechanism so that when there is bad behavior, you are more likely to say something like, well, at least he or she didn't give me that look this time. Because our level of toleration has risen. The first time we got that look, we were hurt, but we raised our toleration. So the next time we got that look, we make an excuse. We say something like, oh, that's just who they are. That's what they do. And we start to normalize it. And normalizing it puts us on a downward spiral of allowing others to hurt us. So I don't want you to do that. And I know you may have already been or may be in a situation that has already happened. But going forward, I want you to remember the steps that are taken that allow people to hurt you. And that is one of them, developing a higher tolerance for bad behavior. Another one I've already mentioned is minimizing and even invalidating your own wants and needs. So you could be in a relationship and you might have wants and needs. You might want to feel love and connection, and you might want to see or hear the other person say loving and connecting and supporting and kind things, but they don't. And when they don't, that higher tolerance develops, which causes you to minimize that you need that at all. So I need you to be really careful. If you're in this situation and you find that you are minimizing what you deserve, which is kindness and respect, if you find that you're minimizing those things, then you have already developed a higher tolerance for bad behavior that actually allows that bad behavior to come in. Not that you want it, not that you attracted it, not that you deserve it, but because of the lack of resources and the lack of education in the area of telling people what you will and won't accept, even at the risk of the relationship. This is something I've said many times on my other show, The Overwhelmed Brain, and I may have said it a few times on this show, but I really do believe that when you honor yourself appropriately, then you honoring yourself takes precedence. It overrides any relationship that you're in, because you're talking about core level stuff. You're talking about who you are at the deepest level. That's who you're protecting, you at the deepest level. So when somebody comes along and does emotionally harmful behavior on you, if you're not protecting that person that you are, that you inside, and that gets compromised, what's left? This is why so many people tell me that after they get out of an emotionally abusive relationship, they are a shell of their former self. They are hollowed out from the inside. They are walking around as the result of many months or years of emotional abuse, and they don't know who they are anymore because of all these levels or steps of denial and developing a higher tolerance for bad behavior and self-invalidation. And all of this I'm talking about comes along with you building layers around your heart to protect yourself, because what was once an environment to feel safe in, to feel like you could be yourself and show your vulnerability without fear, has now turned into an ever-increasing toxic environment. And when that happens, you automatically put on more and more protection. So the protection in this case is adding those layers around your heart, because that is where your vulnerability is. And doing that is the result of doing all these other steps, especially the tolerance. If I were to look at someone who had a high tolerance for bad behavior, I'm willing to bet they have a lot of emotional armor around their heart. And because of that, it's harder for them to connect. It's harder for them to really allow people in at the deepest emotional level, because they just don't want to feel the pain. They don't want to feel the hurt. And that's unfortunate, because there are a lot of people out there that don't hurt others, at least not in this way. And if they do, it's unintentional. There are a lot of people out there. It's just that sometimes we get stuck with the wrong person. Sometimes we get stuck with someone who does behaviors that they don't even know they're doing, but it hurts. I think when you meet someone like that, who does behaviors like that, they have to be told what they're doing. Hey, you're hurting me. You're doing behavior that is hurtful to me. It makes me cry. It makes me not want to love you. It makes me fear you. If somebody told me that in my relationships over the years, I'd have to take a huge step back and say, what are you saying? What are you talking about? I'm hurting you? Yes, you're hurting me. What you're doing is hurting me. I want you to stop. That would have been the smack in the face I needed to change any behaviors that I was doing that were unacceptable. But this information wasn't available to me. I didn't know that that's what you're supposed to do. And my partners in life didn't know that that's what they were supposed to do either. So it never happened. But this is why I share stuff like this. I want you to know what to do. I want you to know that you need to protect you, capital Y-O-U. You at the deepest level. You at your core. And this is what I told this person on the Facebook group, is that when you separate from someone, it gives you an opportunity to find yourself again. And if you can't find yourself, then it gives you an opportunity to rebuild yourself. Figure out who you really are and reconnect with you. It gives you an opportunity to have your brain back. It gives you an opportunity to think on your own without the influence of anyone else, or at least the toxic person. When you're away from the toxic environment and toxic people, you get your brain back. You get to think without fogginess and process information with clarity. But it takes a while, because when you get out of a toxic situation, you're usually fuzzy. And your thoughts usually include the other person in some way. When they include the other person in some way, then you're still not at the point where you're reconnecting with yourself, because you're considering what the other person may think. This is why I said earlier, sometimes you have to honor yourself at the risk of losing the relationship. That is the truest and deepest level of honoring yourself. That is telling you, capital Y-O-U, way down inside, that not only do you matter, but you are so important that you never, ever want to lose that person to anyone, or allow anyone to hurt you. That's what you're telling the deepest part of you, is that when you honor yourself to the fullest, even at the risk of losing the relationship, you're telling the capital Y-O-U inside of you that you will never let any harm come to them. And the people that love you and care about you are going to honor that about you. They're going to want you to do that. They're going to support you supporting yourself. They're going to love you loving yourself. They're going to honor you honoring yourself. This is the kind of support that you deserve in life. When you value capital Y-O-U inside of you, and you're with someone who doesn't value you or that capital Y-O-U inside of you, then you may need to stand up for yourself. And yes, I know I said pick your battles wisely at the beginning. I say that because sometimes standing up for yourself means getting out of a situation, not necessarily yelling back or fighting back, because some people, that might be dangerous. So you just have to pick your battles wisely and know when it's time to do this and when it's not, and when it's time to move on. The person in the Facebook group asked about reconnection and how can she reconnect with her partner after all this time, after all the years of emotionally abusive behavior, and he's working on himself and he seems to be improving. She's going to give it that one final chance in hopes that things will change and maybe she can salvage this relationship. Kudos. I mean, I think that's a great thing. If you give somebody one more chance, then you can look back after it's all over and say, you know what? I tried every possible route. I did everything I possibly could. I exhausted all my resources and tried to make it work. That way, if it does work, then you can say, hey, I'm glad I did it. And if it doesn't work, you can say, there's nothing more I could have done. That's closure. When you go through these steps, that's closure. I'm not saying everyone should do this. Sometimes, if it's time to leave, it's time to leave. And sometimes you have second thoughts and you see improvements and you think to yourself that maybe there's a chance. You just have to know yourself well enough and love yourself well enough in order to protect yourself and care for yourself and support yourself when the other person doesn't. And what I told this person in the Facebook group is that when you separate in an emotionally abusive relationship, it is that opportunity to reconnect with yourself, find yourself, and know yourself so well so that when you return, nobody can take that away from you. That's what you should do during a separation. Get to know yourself so well that you love that person and you will never, ever let any harm come to that person again. Never. Because when you return, if you're back in that same old cycle and you repeat those old steps of denial and developing a higher tolerance and minimizing and self-persuasion and all that, you're going to be right back in a situation that you don't like, and those emotional barriers will never go away. It'll be really hard to connect with them, let alone yourself. And for this person in the Facebook group, before she returns, I believe she should have such a strong connection with herself that if any harm comes her way, she's ready to say, She's ready to say, no way. I'm not going to accept that behavior. What you're doing right now is hurtful, and it is harmful to me. It is harmful to the relationship. And if you ever do it again, I'm leaving. Period. I know that's easy for me to say, but this is how well you have to know yourself and how much you have to love yourself. I hope this helps you if you're in a similar situation, or if you've been contemplating what to do next in a relationship that you're thinking about. Just remember, capital Y-O-U, that deepest part of you, is the most important person in the world. And when you know that through and through, you're not going to let any harm come to that person. And if anyone does try to harm that person, you'll know exactly what to do. I had to learn all this stuff. I had to learn personal boundaries. I had to learn what it takes to respect myself to the point that nothing else was more important than myself. And I know that sounds egoistic, but it's not egoistic if you are caring about yourself and loving others. It's self-compassion. It's self-care in the presence of toxic behavior. Because you're not going to think like this if somebody's not mistreating you. You're not going to think that you need to protect the core of who you are around healthier people. You're not going to go around thinking about that. So it's not about being egoistic or egotistical. It's about self-compassion and showing others that when they misbehave, that's when you have to focus on the most important person in your world. And when that person feels safe and loved and comforted and protected, you're going to love everyone else just as much. You're going to feel compassion for them. You're going to want to support them. You're going to want to see them happy because they want to see you happy. It's when there's hurtful behavior coming towards you where you have to step in and be your own protector, show yourself compassion, show yourself love, kindness, and respect, so that you don't have to wrap those layers around your heart so tight that you can't even connect with yourself anymore. This is what it's all about, really, is keeping that connection open with yourself so that you can allow all this self-love and self-compassion and self-care. You don't want people taking that away from you. When you have to wrap those protective layers around your heart, it's almost like they're saying, not only do I want you to feel unsafe around me, but I also don't want you to feel safe inside yourself. And if you're in this type of relationship, you know exactly what that feels like. But this is why I'm sharing this with you. I want you to connect with yourself, or at least reconnect with yourself. And if you haven't done that in a long time, now is a great time to start. There might be many big obstacles in the way, but every step you take to let information like this sink in is a step in the right direction. Thanks so much for joining me. Share this with others that might benefit. Love and Abuse is the official podcast of the Mean Workbook, an assessment and healing guide for difficult relationships. The workbook provides an evaluation of your relationship based on a 200-point assessment. It's geared toward romantic relationships, but many have used it to determine if family or others in their life are being manipulative or emotionally abusive as well. If you're in a difficult situation and would like to pinpoint the unhealthy behaviors causing you to leave so many interactions feeling bad, let the workbook help you discover the specific components of bad behavior and put into words what you're experiencing. Get the tools you need to help you reach clarity over at loveandabuse.com. I also want to mention that I have started a waiting list for a new program that I am creating in 2021 called Healed Being. It is for the emotional abuser who wants to change. I have gotten so many requests from people who say they are the emotionally abusive person and they do want to change, but they don't know how. So I am creating the program right now. Today's date is 12/9/2020. So by January, I'll be starting the creation process of that program, but I am accepting emails. So if you want to be on that list because you believe you are doing emotionally abusive behavior, head over to healedbeing.com. It's 2 words, healedbeing.com, and sign up. For those of you who are victims of emotional abuse, the Love and Abuse podcast and, of course, the Mean Workbook are the resources that I've created for you. And, of course, this show covers many aspects of emotional abuse and sometimes both sides of it. So for those of you who haven't purchased the workbook or can't, this is why I do this show. I want to continue giving you resources that you can use to help you through challenging situations. And if there are people out there that are learning about their own emotionally abusive ways and want to change, everyone's lives will get better. The emotional abuse victim, of course, their life will get better because there'll be less people that do this kind of behavior. And of course, the perpetrator of emotional abuse, once they are healed from wanting to be controlling or manipulative, the burden lifts. It's a huge weight off their back. It's a lot of stress relief. So everyone benefits from this. And I hope that you're in a situation now that is on a healing journey instead of a hurting journey. And again, if you're listening to resources like this, you're going in the right direction. Thank you again for joining me. Remember that this show exists to remind you that you are not alone and you're not going crazy. You deserve to be treated with respect and kindness. You deserve honesty and sincerity. You deserve to be treated as worthy and significant. Because you are. Good to connect with you today. We'll talk again soon.